All right, and welcome to another edition of the Sunday Night Sit Down. I am your host, Miracle Jones, and we are here for a very special conversation where we're going to be talking about the upcoming proposed rules to the change of the ways that criminal procedure will work here in Pennsylvania. The Criminal Procedure Rules Committee has put forth some conversation around some proposed rules to the legislature about some things that they would like to see changed with our criminal procedure process, particularly around bail, parole, and people going through the criminal justice system. To talk about these changes and what's going on, we've brought together a group of people from around Pennsylvania, a group of experts who are going to talk to you about some of these changes and why it's very important for you to get involved. And so we're going to have a really fun conversation. It's going to be really enlightening. And again, this is just a conversation about what is going on with these proposed changes, how it impacts everyday Pennsylvanians, and why we need you to submit comment by 5 p.m. tomorrow. You know, it's a Sunday. I know everybody's at home chilling. You know, listen, the MLB is on a lockout. There's going to be some extra time for you all to get involved. So we really need you to send an email to the committee, a quick phone call, and to start this off, and welcome Michelle. Michelle, can you just give us a rundown about what is criminal procedure, who is on this committee, and why should we be really paying attention to what these proposed changes are going to be?
Yes, happy to do that, Miracle. So when people talk about the law, there's actually lots of different places where law comes from. There's the Constitution, right? So in relation to bail, the Constitution says that it should not be excessive. There's statutes, which are passed, by our legislature. There's case law, which is when, the judges are hearing an appeal from a case. They're looking at the statutes, they're looking at the Constitution, and they're interpreting, hey, under this circumstance, how does this law apply here? And then there's the rules. A lot of people kind of tend to forget about the rules, but in practice, the rules are very, very important because it is like the rubber meets the road. How do we practically make sure that the Constitution is being upheld, the statutes are being followed, and that the case law is as well? Well, you put it in the rules and you say, okay, judge, these laws over here mean that situation you do X, Y, and Z in order to protect someone's rights or what have you. The rules, there's rules of criminal procedure, there's rules of evidence, there's rules of juvenile court and civil court. What we're talking about today is the rules of criminal procedure. They are proposing to change the rules in Pennsylvania that deal with bail. All right, they're located at Rule 520, and they're just going to overhaul 520 plus, and they're just going to overhaul the whole section and create new rules. Just write the rules new. This committee is made up of lawyers and judges appointed by the Supreme Court, and none of these proposed changes necessarily have to be adopted by the court, right? So now is the time for public comment. And we actually have the public has until the 8th of March to email or write a letter to this person who is the essentially liaison Their job is to, I actually interviewed for this job about 14 months ago. Their job is to be the liaison between the public and the committee on these types of things. So what are these changes basically? Well, it does not cash bail, okay? But it does go a long way towards clarifying that cash bail should not be used unless there's no other, reasonable conditions to assure the person's appearance in court and compliance with the other conditions. So it's got some good and bad things that we want to talk about today. I think on the list of bad things, it creates 2 additional grounds that a judge can incarcerate someone in lieu of bail for. Okay, so under these rules now, it would be okay for a judge to set cash bail on you, deny your liberty, if they thought you were a danger to yourself. That's not a thing that exists in the rules right now. It also creates this additional ground to set cash bail for someone if the judge thinks it's necessary to assure the integrity of the court, whatever the heck that means. So you can see how that would, kind of be bad and be able to be used to deny people their liberty for no other reason other than the integrity of the court. On the good side, I think that there's some things here about that deserve to be, hey, attaboy, good job. One of those is the requirement that a judge fill out a form before they actually set someone to jail. I mean, this would increase transparency. There is currently no requirement that a judge state their reason. There's also currently not a requirement that a judge take any sort of actual review of someone's financial ability to post bail. So this would create that. This would create an extra hearing for someone that's not able to post their bail. They would be entitled to a hearing within the 72 hours of their commitment if they did not post bail. You'd be entitled to an attorney at that hearing, which is good because we don't entitle people to attorneys at their bail hearings now. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the changes that are being proposed, Miracle.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. And coming to you, first you, Malik, and then you, Alex, can you just talk about how this can help or harm people here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, thanks so much, Miracle. And I think it's just helpful because I know these are really long and legal rules, but I think also just centering the fact that, there are thousands of people across the state of Pennsylvania who are jailed and convicted of no crime except an inability to pay for their freedom. And so I think trying to look at these, I mean, as Michelle said, these rules aren't going to end cash bail, but really trying to look at how are they going to impact the lives of people, our neighbors, every single day. And I think, to me, when we think about it, that's sort of the prism through which looking at the laws and trying to figure out, like, materially, is it going to improve more folks being free and being with their families? So I guess I can start off, and I'll be really trying to continue what Michelle said. One of the things that has always been the case in Pennsylvania is bail is not supposed to be set for the sole reason of detaining someone. And I think one of the good things, or at least one of the things that could result in more release, is that these rules would say that bail would have to be reasonably attainable, right? We know that there are so many people who go through our bail hearings across the state who are detained because bail is not within their means to pay, and which creates this two-tier system where folks who are poor, largely Black and brown, are caged because they can't pay for their freedom. So one of the things that these rules would do is to make sure that magistrates and MDJs are setting bail that is reasonably attainable, and that, as Michelle said, when they set bail, that they write out the specific risks that monetary bail is intended to mitigate. And so, as Michelle mentioned, one of the things that I think is important right now, In most parts of the state, bail hearings are completely off record anyway, in the sense that there's no documentation kept. So the fact that judges will have to justify their reasoning in writing can not only be good for transparency, but also for potential appeals and those things. So I think that's a useful thing. In addition, right now, and if you can pay bail, you could be sitting in jail. I know in Philadelphia, sometimes it could be weeks without seeing a judge to get the opportunity to review your initial bail that's set. And one of the things that this would do is if bail is not paid, it would trigger what they're calling a condition review hearing, so that you can have and that condition review hearing, I believe, is within 72 hours, where a judge can review the bail that was set with the opportunity, hopefully, for that bail to be changed or lowered. So it creates another hearing so that the bail can be reviewed. So I think those are two good things that could potentially result in more freedom for folks. And then the other thing, and this is not directly related to bail, but we know that in addition to bail, another reason that a lot of folks are detained across the state is probation detainers. That across the state, there are these automatic probation detainers. So if you are on probation and are arrested, I know in Philadelphia, at least, detainers are lodged automatically. And so it traps people in. And in some ways, it's even worse than bail because you have no way of getting out except seeing your back judge. And these rules would take a step in the right direction in terms of us moving away from automatic probation detainers. But I'll pass it on to Alex to talk about if there's any other good things, but also some of the really problematic things that could actually do harm to our neighbors.
Yeah, thanks so much, Malik. And thanks, Miracle, as well. So happy to be making my One Hood Media debut. And I think before I dive into some of the like nitty gritty, I think some issues that both Malik and Michelle brought up that are important to sort of highlight is that bail is supposed to be paid, right? So the idea that judges should be setting incredibly high bail and keeping people detained is not abiding by the logic of the system that has been set up, right? So bail is supposed to be a mechanism for release. All it's saying is that if you can come up with X amount of dollars, other things being equal, you should be released back into the community, right? So the idea is hopefully to change these rules so that that becomes a reality. And then also, I think a really important part of the good, like Malik mentioned, is that documentation of judges being forced to, one, actually review people's financials in a meaningful way, which doesn't happen now. And also it's useful for us as a public to be able to hold magisterial district judges accountable and hold judges accountable for setting bail, right? Because they are elected officials. They are supposed to be accountable to us, so that transparency will go a long way in enabling folks to be able to see who are the judges that are disproportionately and unfairly holding our community members in cages. So diving into some of the negative proposed rules, one of the proposed rules is particularly troublesome, and Michelle touched on this, because it could very well lead to judges and magistrates being able to hold people with mental health issues, physical disabilities, or substance use issues in higher numbers in pretrial detention. Bail is supposed to be, again, by their own logic, only to induce folks to show up to future court dates or for public safety, right? But these rules would expand that for the quote unquote protection of a defendant from immediate risk of substantial physical self-harm, which again places judges in the role of doctors, which they are not, right? And it's pretty clear that Black and brown people, low income folks, and again, folks with physical disabilities will bear the brunt of these vague rules. And we've seen with vague rules, magisterial district judges tend to discriminate against those classes of people. And also the extremely vaguely worded, the ability to incarcerate someone to preserve the integrity of the judicial system, which is basically just whatever a judge feels like doing, right? There's no accountability there. There's no clear limits or guardrails there. So that's certainly one of the more troubling proposals. And also another one is that it offers judges a laundry list of like new non-monetary conditions that they can assign to folks that are under pretrial consideration, which they can basically force someone that comes before them to maintain employment or attend an educational program or be under a curfew, or electronic monitoring, which we call incarceration, right? So we don't want to simply replace bail with other inequitable conditions that would also just be vehicles or trapdoors to end up sending people back to a cage, right? Also, the rules touch on pretrial risk assessment tools, which I won't get into here. We could do a whole nother segment on pretrial risk assessment tools, but needless to say, they are very bad. We do not support their use. And it's sort of this faux science algorithm that's supposed to be able to predict whether someone should be held pretrial or not. And I think a lot of folks are familiar with sort of the algorithmic bias that exists against like our communities, right? The communities that we all come from, the communities that we serve. And then touching on the probation and parole rules, which are also super important. I'll just note here that I encourage folks, wherever you're sitting in Pennsylvania, I definitely encourage you to reach out to your local, either county commissioners, the warden of your prison, your local district attorney's office, and find out the population of your local county jail. Ask them how many are being held on cash bail, how many are being held on detainers. For a lot of county jails, it's fair to assume that the majority of people there are being held pretrial, either on cash bail alone or on a detainer, probation and parole detainer, along with cash bail. So again, these are all folks being incarcerated pretrial that have not been adjudged to be guilty, contrary to like what most people assume about county prisons. But going back to the detainers, similarly, these proposed rules would expand the ability of judges to incarcerate folks for a defendant's safety. Again, judges not being doctors, and would, again, similarly to the bail rules, we fear lead to the harmful incarceration of folks with mental illness, addiction, substance use, physical disabilities as well. So that's sort of digging into the details of the negative proposed rules that we're hoping to fight against before the deadline.
Thank you so much for all of that information, Alex. And coming to you, Manny, you are an individual who has been impacted directly by the bail bond system, and you work now to make sure that people are free as much as possible. Can you just talk about the situation in Pennsylvania and what these proposed changes mean to everyday Pennsylvanians?
Right. So the way that bail works in Pennsylvania, especially in Allegheny County, I could touch on like by definition is kind of like unconstitutional. You know what I'm saying? Like Michelle mentioned, excessive bail is not supposed to be set, and it is. It's set like regularly. You know what I mean? Like I think I had a total of like over 100,000 altogether. Matter of fact, in Clarion County right now, we're working on a bailout. This guy's bail was $100,000. And like Alex said, like it's supposed to be paid. Who has $100,000? You know what I'm saying? And luckily it got reduced, but it got reduced to $50,000, which is still excessive. You know what I mean? The way that is supposed to work, or the way that it does work is that it's used as a tool to incarcerate people. You know what I'm saying? Now, these preliminary arraignments, they happen behind closed doors. Like I said, there's no documentation. A lot of the times, matter of fact, every time I was there was no counsel, there was no representation, you know what I'm saying? And in Allegheny County, it even happens like the decisions are made like before the actual arraignment takes place. You know what I mean? Like I once paid a bill, and I went down there to pick the person up. I paid the bill at the counter, and the lady said, well, they didn't even have the arraignment yet. Well, how is the bail amount set? How am I able to pay it through the system if they didn't even go through the arraignment? You know what I mean? That's the way it works, man. And no consideration about, you know, what the person can pay, you know what I'm saying? No type of counsel, like I said. And they have a whole lot of discretion too. And I say this a lot because I think it's really important, because to me, like if you do have the discretion, that kind of gives you like power to be discriminative, you know what I mean? To discriminate against people. And it happened to me, you know what I'm saying? Every time I was down there, I saw white people get RR, means like released on their own recognizance. I saw Black people get no bail at all, meaning they're sitting, you know, at least until the preliminary hearing where it could be, you know, brought up again, or, you know what I mean? And my very first case, I had a co-defendant. We had the exact same charges. His bail was $5,000 and mine was $25,000. You know what I'm saying? Like for no reason, just because they could. You know what I mean? And that's the way that it works, man. And some magistrates I've seen recently have been using, I guess, like their power, you know, to reduce the population in the ACJ at least. And I've seen that. I've seen a lot of judges recently give more or give more non-monetary, which is cool. But my stance is they shouldn't be held pre-trial at all. You know what I'm saying? that's kind of my stance. Like in Pennsylvania, they said the only reason that somebody should actually have cash bail is if they're charged with a crime that could have them have them serve life in prison. You know what I'm saying? So that's really just homicide. That's really the only reason somebody is supposed to actually have the cash bail. You know what I'm saying? For real. And because everybody should be presumed innocent. And I said this before, and I think it's important, man. You know, if somebody like actually fights their case and goes to trial, they could be sitting pre-trial for years. You know what I mean? I had a cousin who sat for like 4 years. You know what I'm saying? And now, if he was found not guilty, he doesn't get that time back. You know what I'm saying? Or he doesn't get any type of reparation or anything for that time. But we know that even if somebody sits for 3 days, it can have a negative impact on their life. You know what I mean? They can lose their job. They can lose custody of the children. They can lose their housing. You know what I mean? All types of stuff. And, you know, like I said, we're supposed to be presumed innocent, yet by holding people pre-trial, you're inadvertently, or not even inadvertently, you're punishing them whether or not, or before they determine whether or not they should be punished. You know what I'm saying? Because when my cousin got convicted, that 4 years was included in his sentence. He got like time served, you know what I mean? But what if he was acquitted? Like in my case, I was acquitted, you know what I mean? So, well, you know, I've said this a lot, and I feel like people may have heard it a lot, but maybe not, you know what I'm saying? We don't know. And I think it's important to keep stressing that we don't believe anybody should be held pre-trial at all. I think that's extremely important. Anything that they do in these rules that will reduce the population in the jail, we're in support of, and anything that will increase the population or maintain the status quo, we're against. You know what I mean? In the ACJ, the average population is like 1,800 people, right? They said 1,841 people, right? 91% of that population are males, 67% of them are Black, right? And like Alex said, we know most of these people are being held pre-trial. I think there's like 2% of people actually serving a sentence, you know what I mean? And the Bucket Bail Fund, we get maybe like 5 referrals a week, maybe, you know what I mean? So a lot of people, they can't afford the bail. Everybody doesn't know that the bail fund is a resource for them to, access And a lot of people are being held with detainers, you know what I mean? So we couldn't bail them out anyway. And we run into that problem a whole lot. And I think anybody who gets arrested at all is going to be impacted by these rule changes, you know what I'm saying? And so, something else I'll stress, and I'll probably leave it at that, is that an arrest or a charge is an accusation, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody did something. Even people who believe in this carceral system or believe in punitive justice, right? I guess they assume that if somebody is arrested, it's because they did something wrong. It's not always necessarily the case. You know what I'm saying? Like in Pittsburgh, I think the police force is like 84% white. And you know, it's extremely racist, you know what I'm saying? As somebody, or even if you don't focus on the police and you think about people who have accused others, and that's something that happened to me, you know what I'm saying? My first case, I was in a predominantly white neighborhood. A white guy went to a white cop and said, hey, he did this. And then they arrested me the next day. No investigation, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't get a chance to even tell my side of the story until 2 years later at my trial, you know what I mean? And then the judge said, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And that's why I got acquitted, you know what I mean? But yeah, my fault. I guess I had a flashback or something.
Okay.
That's common practice, you know what I'm saying? So I do think it's important to reiterate that just because somebody is charged with a crime doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty. And even though some of these rules are good, and of course a few of them are bad, everybody pointed it out, we don't have to be holding people pre-trial at all. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that we gotta keep pressing on them, you know.
Thank you so much for that, Manny. And for those of you who are tuning in, we're having a conversation because the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has recently announced proposed changes to the rules of criminal procedure that will impact, well, bail, bond, pretrial, and even post-trial release is impacted here in Pennsylvania. What we're here for, we're asking people to email criminal rules at pacourts.us. Again, that is criminal rules at pacourts.us, and basically show your support for the proposed changes that would allow for people to be returned home as soon as possible, allow for folks to be at home instead of incarcerated, as well as saying you are against the expansion of people being able to be held pre or post-trial due to mental health situations, addictive disorders, or people who are at risk for self-harm. Because again, we believe that no one should be incarcerated, especially those who have mental health and addictive disorders. Those people need support, treatment. We know that jails and prisons are a place of violence, a place of where people actually decompensate. And so to have judges have the authority to incarcerate people solely because they're depressed or suicidal or have active use disorder, we're really against that, because those are not the places where people need to go to get support, to get therapy, and to get help and assistance. So we're asking people again to reach out to the committee. They have until 5 p.m. Tomorrow, March 8th, to send their support. And as we wrap up, I'm gonna come to you, Michelle, first, then Malik, then Alex, and Manny. Can you just talk about why it's so important that people send out their comments, to take advantage of this public comment period? First to you, Michelle, then Malik, then Alex, then Manny.
Yes, thank you. So for my part, I just want to say, I mean, I'm in Lancaster County. I'm part of starting the Lancaster Bail Fund, and I've been getting it off the ground for the last year or so. Okay, this is not Philly, this is not Pittsburgh, this is, Pennsylvania that we're talking about. everywhere has a bail problem. Okay, it's in your backyard whether you know it or not. And the thing about a bail problem is that it is not one dimensional. It like, the only reason we have a bail problem is because we have racism, we have war on the we have war on poverty, right? We don't give people access to, what they need in terms of medical care, whether that's, mental health care, whether that's substance use disorder treatment, whether that's therapy for PTSD, for being arrested. Manny, I had never heard that story before. When that just sounds awfully traumatizing. And so what you get is, you get the fact that we are treating our jails as de facto solution to all of our problems. And some of these proposed changes are just going to make that even worse, right? What we're doing as a society clearly isn't working, because if our approach to the criminal system was, we wouldn't have 25% of the incarcerated population in the globe being behind bars here in the US, right? It's just not working. So currently, we do have rules in place. We have laws in place to deal with people that are a danger to themselves, right? It is barbaric and it is, harsh to, but it exists. Okay. Doctors make recommendations. It's under the Mental Health Procedures Act. There's lots of different rules around this, and it's doctors that are making the recommendation to an administrative review judge about the person's commitment, not a district attorney, not a cop saying that this person is a danger to themselves, right? And under the Mental Health Procedures Act, as it is already, I mean, there are time limits, right? You can only detain someone 72 hours for the first go around if you think that they're a danger to themselves, if that's what a doctor says, if that's what the judge believes, right? If you allow a judge to set cash bail for someone who's a danger to themselves, when's the end? Is it 2 years? Would they have to sit for 2 years? Like Manny would have. There's a lot of changes, but that's one of the bad ones. And as a smaller bail fund, I can tell you that this is all we see. We see, because we've only raised $15,000, but we posted bail so far for 13 people with that money, because it is extremely common for judges to set a small amount of cash bail that operates to detain someone in our jail where they're maybe getting treatment, but that's not what jails are, right? Jails are not treatment facilities. And we do that for people that don't need to be there. We do that for the schizophrenic lady that lost her car, right? And we don't know what to do with her, so we just throw her in jail. It is, I can't emphasize enough how dangerous some of this language is. And it is important to me to be here today. So thank you for letting me be here today and kind of share this message, because it is not just a bail. This is not just about bail. This is about how we deal with issues in society, and we already are tilted way too far towards incarcerating the hell out of all of our problems, and this will only take us closer to that. Some of these proposed changes would.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. On to you, Alex.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it's really crucial, if you're listening to this and, you're troubled by anything you heard, or you care about the harms that the criminal legal system does to our communities, that it's just super important for you to submit comments. I think a lot of folks, when it comes to these issues, feel like, well, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert, right? But by virtue, these are rules about our communities, right? So by being a member of our community, you may know someone that's been directly impacted, you may have been directly impacted, right? You are expert, you have as much as a right to share your opinions and use your voice as anyone else. And something I like to bring up a lot is that, you know, regardless of how you may feel about your individual police chief or your individual DA, right? As a whole, the police have a politics. As a whole, the District Attorneys Association has a politics. As a whole, judges in Pennsylvania have politics, right? And invariably, they are carceral politics. They are risk averse. They will always, and they've shown to by look at the stats of your local county jail, look at the stats statewide. Their politics is to be carceral, and they're hearing those voices every day. So this is one of the opportunities where we're able to use our voice as people to stand up and say, hey, don't expand the purposes of cash bail to include self-harm. Don't lock up people with mental health or physical disabilities or substance use disorders. Do change how we use detainers so that Pennsylvanians that are on probation or parole, which by the way, Pennsylvania is one of the worst states in the country for probation and parole, do change the rules so that folks are not being held on probation or parole to detainers. We need to take every opportunity we can get to use our voice to push back against the carceral politics of elected officials and the people who uphold the criminal legal system. So it's just super crucial. The comments you submit don't have to be legalistic. They don't have to be super precise. We just need you to use your voice and write out what you think is right? And encourage them to use their power they have to set rules that will reduce our ridiculous prison populations and reduce the racial disparities, economic disparities of people that are incarcerated.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. And Malik, I'm turning it over to you.
Yeah, I think Alex and Michelle covered everything I was going to say, but I will say that for every person that's arraigned, right, it's normally, you know, the people or the Commonwealth versus that person. And I always like to stress that because everything that's done in that room is done in our name. And you know, we elect these people. They're spending our money to detain our neighbors. So I think the whole idea that we not only do we need to have a say, but we must have a say in how the system works and how you know, elected officials are using policies to detain more of our community members. And so I think it's so important that we be involved in that and really push elected officials and other stakeholders to create policies that don't rely on caging our neighbors en masse. One thing I often say too, you know, and I hate to use New York as a comparison because we all know like New York it's not, I don't know, I'm from Philly, so I just think Philly's like the best city ever, but no disrespect to the Pittsburgh folks. But, you know, New York has a population of about 8.4 million people. And it has a jail population of about 5,000. Philadelphia has a population of about 1.5 million and a jail population of about 4,000. So like, just to give some sense of like, we got a lot of work to do in Philadelphia and then across the state. And this system of relying on sort of mass warehousing of folks isn't going to do it. And I think Alex and Michelle spoke about the problems that we have. And I just think societal problems and inequities we have. And I just think it's so important to point out that bail, you know, mass incarceration, all these things, they don't address or get rid of those problems. They just get rid of human beings, right? And so I think that's really important to stress when we talk about mental health or we talk about addiction, that jail and incarceration aren't actually dealing with those problems. And so I think the answer is to get more folks home and really investment in community. So, but yeah, I think if folks can write, and as Alex said, it doesn't have to be legalistic or anything or long, but that we want rules that will maximize the freedom as many of our neighbors as we can.
Thank you so much for that, Malik. And turning it over to you, Manny.
Absolutely. Want to second or co-sign everything that everybody has said. And I think it's important for people to make their voices heard, because it could be you that's impacted by this. You know what I mean? Like, they're arresting people every day. You know what I'm saying? They can hop out on you at any time and arrest you for any reason. Last time I got arrested, it was 2 misdemeanors. And like they really didn't have a case and it got tossed out, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that it happened, and I was in a bullpen with a bunch of people who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know what I'm saying? But something that I think a lot of people are aware of now is because of quote unquote like a rise in violence. A lot of politicians are using rhetoric that is very similar to like the 90s, you know what I'm saying? Like when they had like the 90s crime bill, increased the prison population, built all of these prisons, you know what I'm saying? And let's not forget, Joe Biden, I think, wrote that bill, you know what I'm saying, unless I'm wrong. And Kamala Harris was a prosecutor, right? You know what I'm saying? And so all of that stuff is coming like from the top down, you know what I'm saying? And here in the city, in Pittsburgh, I mean, like the cops have had like a heavy hand, particularly on people exercising their rights, First Amendment rights to protest, you know what I'm saying, which is why I got arrested the last time, you know what I'm saying, just for being there and protesting, you know what I mean? And, you know, it could be you next.
Thank you so much for that, Manny. And we're here because it's no laughing matter that people are facing incarceration. As Manny said, the 90s crime bill wave is coming back. A lot of people are really advocating across political lines for increased police presence, mandatory minimums we've seen be floated around this past election cycle. And so it's very important that people actually take the time to reach out to the Supreme Court's, Criminal Procedure Committee and just basically express support for any type of measure that reduces, incarceration, particularly for pretrial consideration, and to move against incarceration. We want to make sure that people are able to have the freedoms as full citizens and full individuals to move about freely and not have to have incarceration as this stick or this threat to them as they navigate the criminal justice system. So again, what we're asking you to do by tomorrow, Monday, March 8th at 5 p.m., please contact the committee. You can email them at criminalrules@pacourts.us. Again, that's criminalrules@pacourts.us. If you are someone who has a fax machine, you can fax your statement over to 717-231-9521. Again, that's 717-231-9521 to the Criminal Procedure Rules Committee at the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania's Pennsylvania Judicial Center. Again, it's very important. A lot of us are very, very concerned about the expansion of people who are facing incarceration for the risk of self-harm. We know disability justice, the Free Britney movement has really shined a light on how people living with disabilities are really at, the mercy of the criminal justice system, of the courts, who don't even see them as full individuals. And now to have incarceration be a threat to people because they have mental health disorders or addictive disorders is something we're very, very concerned about. But there are some great things in this legislation, such as allowing people in Philly to get summoned so they don't have to be arrested on site. They can get summoned, basically a ticket in the mail, and tell them to show up to court. We want to make sure that people get, expedited gag non-hearing, so, they don't have to languish in jail to figure out whether or not they violated their probation or parole. So these are some things that we like about this bill, these proposed changes, some things you have concerns about. And so we're asking you to, take some time, less than 5 minutes, to reach out to the Rules Committee. I want to thank so much, Alex, Malik, Michelle, and Manny for spending their Sunday with us to talk about why we need you all to send a quick email or a quick fax to the Rules Committee. And thank you so much for turning this Sunday Sit Down. I am Miracle Jones. I look forward to seeing you for the rest of the week, but please make sure you send an email. If you follow everyone on the ACLU, the PA, Bell Fund Alliance will have a toolkit out for you so you can get the wording right to talk to your legislature, talk to the Rules Committee, and we'll see you there. So thank you all so much for tuning in this week's edition of the Sunday Sit Down. Have a great evening. Thank you so much.